Okay, here we go. Welcome to everyone to session number 192 of Kevin Reads A Course in Miracles. In today's session we are in chapter 25, right, which is entitled The Justice of God. And remember, the justice of God is just that everybody wins, nobody loses. All right. Everyone is part of the oneness. Okay. And Roman numeral 3, section 3, is entitled Perception and Choice. Okay, let us begin. To the extent to which you value guilt, to that extent will you perceive a world in which attack is justified. To the extent to which you recognize that guilt is meaningless, to that extent you will perceive attack cannot be justified. This is in accord with perception's fundamental law. You see what you believe is there, and you believe it there because you want it there. Perception has no other law than this. The rest but stems from this, to hold it up and offer it support. This is perception's form, adapted to this world, and God's more basic law, that love creates itself and nothing but itself. Right? This is perception's form, adapted to this world of God's more basic law, that love creates itself and nothing but itself. So that's God's law. Love just creates itself, and it extends. All right? The ego takes that for itself, and then we have perception. Right? Once we believe we're separated and we believe we're aligned with the ego thought system, right, we think that what we project, we see. Right? We project the thought of guilt, and we see it in many forms. And we see it there because Jesus says you want to see it there. Right? Because if that thing or that person or that situation is guilty, then your ego tells you then you're free of the guilt. You got rid of it. But you have to ask yourself, does that work? Never works, and yet we keep trying. Okay. So to the extent to which you value guilt, to that extent will you perceive a world in which attack is justified. All right, so if I value guilt, if I value that thought of separation, I did it, I separated, but with that automatically comes guilt. So if I value that, then I have to keep projecting it, and what I project out, I'm going to see a world in which attack is justified. Oh, I can attack that because it's guilty. Okay? I can attack it because it's guilty. All right? And guilt is a valuable defense against the love of God. All right? So when I, on some level, perceive I'm getting too close to the love of God, my ego will help me out here. Keep me safe from the love of God, and something will come up, all right, that needs to be attacked, that needs to have guilt projected onto it. All right, and believe me, in this, you look around in this current world, there's plenty of things that pop up, all right, plenty of targets pop up, all right, and I succumb to it to the extent to which I'm afraid of love. All right? I have to keep reminding myself that. All right? So, to the extent to which you recognize that guilt is meaningless, right, to the extent to which you realize you didn't separate from God, to that extent you will perceive attack cannot be justified. You'll see that the attack can't be justified because there's no need to project guilt. Right? The closer you come to the realization, right, that guilt is meaningless. Right? You never did anything wrong. You didn't separate. So the closer we get to that realization, right, to that extent you will perceive a world in which attack is not justified. All right. Sentence 3, this is in accord with perception's fundamental law. You see what you believe is there, and you believe it there because you want it there. Perception has no other law than this. All right? And we want it there to prove that we separated. That's why we want to perceive all these things. All right? It's in accord with perception's fundamental law. You see what you believe is there. I believe the world is here with all those guilty people out there because I want to see it there. Why do I want to see it there? Because it proves to me that I accomplished the separation. I'm an individual. I'm special. And it wasn't my fault. It's everybody else in the world. All right? Everything else. Not my fault. All right? It's there because you want it there. Perception has no other law than this. The rest but stems from this. To hold it up and to offer it support. Everything just rests on the idea that I want it there to prove that I separated. And it gives feedback, support. Right? This is perception's form. Right? This is perception's form adapted to the world of God's most or more basic law. Right? That love creates itself and nothing but itself. Right? God's law is that love creates itself and extends. And in the world of separation, all right, this is perception's form. It projects the guilt and proves that not only are they guilty, but we're guilty. And that means we separated. So it celebrates. All right, perception and choice. Paragraph 2. God's laws do not obtain directly to a world perception rules, for such a world cannot have been created by the mind to which perception has no meaning. Yet are his laws reflected everywhere. Not that the world where this reflection is real at all, only because his son believes it is. And from his son's belief, he could not let himself be separate entirely. He could not enter his son's insanity with him, but he could be sure his sanity went there with him. So he could not be lost forever in the madness of his wish. So the madness of the wish to be separated from everything, all right, that certainly is madness. This way madness lies. So he says God's laws, which is oneness and the extension of love, everything, the extension of everything everywhere, right? And the law of oneness. He says they don't really obtain directly in this world. They don't pertain directly to a world that perception rules, right? Because that world couldn't have been created by the mind to which perception has no meaning. Right? Perception has no meaning in the mind of God. There's only knowledge. There's only awareness. We don't need perception. We don't need to see something and then figure out what it is. There's no other, there's no duality, right? So perception has no meaning in the oneness, right? There's only one, right? So he says, so God's laws don't really pertain here in this dream. He says, but they came with us into the dream. Right? They're reflected everywhere. So the oneness, the love, is reflected in the dream. All right? And it can be anything that gives you that sense that love is around. Love is in you and around you. All right? It can be anything that reflects love. I mean, there are people that I have encountered, I've seen in my life, that when I think of them, there's a loving aura, right, that is around me and around them, right, because they were reflecting the love of heaven, right, here in this dream world. So yet are his laws reflected everywhere. All right? Not that this world where the reflection is real. He says that's not the case. He says it's only because his son believes that it's real. All right? And from his son's belief, and because the son believes it, the father could not let himself be separated entirely. So the memory of who we are, all right, the memory of the Christ, which is who we are, that extension of God, that can't be separated from our mind. And it comes with us into this silly dream. Silly is a nice word. Right? The father could not enter his son's insanity with him. So the Father is not in the world, all right? But he could be sure his sanity went there with him. So we have the sanity of God, we have the sanity of heaven with us in our memory, in our mind. And he says he did that so you wouldn't be lost forever in the madness of your wish, that wish to be separated. You think you accomplished it. He says, but you can't be lost forever in that insanity. Right? And the way out is to tap into that memory of who you are, represented by Jesus and the Holy Spirit in the Course in Miracles. All right? And remember, the Course in Miracles is not the only path. There's no sense in conversion or, trying to propagate the faith, as they used to say. It's all about you and your perception and your relationship with the oneness and who you truly are. Right? And the memory of who you truly are came with you to prevent total immersion in the insanity. Being lost forever in the insanity. Paragraph 3. Perception rests on choosing. Knowledge does not. Knowledge has but one law because it has but one creator. But this world has two who made it, and they do not see it as the same. To each it has a different purpose, and to each it is a perfect means to serve the goal for which it is perceived. For specialness, it is the perfect frame to set it off, the perfect battleground to wage its wars, the perfect shelter for illusions which it would make real. Not one, but it upholds in its perception. Not one can be fully justified. Right? So he says, perception rests on choice. So I made a choice to believe I was separated. And now my perception is the world of sin, guilt, and fear, and chaos, and war. Right? But there is another choice that can be made, which will change, correct my perception while I'm still in this dream, in this world. Right? Let's see where I lost myself. All right, so when I make that choice for specialness, for separation, all right, this places the perfect frame, all right, to prove it, the perfect battleground to wage its wars, the perfect shelter for its illusions, which it would make real. All right, so when I make that choice to believe I'm separated, that's what perception will report to me. It's the perfect shelter for illusions which it would make real. And not one illusion, right? But it upholds in its perception. It upholds all the illusions, right? And not one can be fully justified. Not one illusion can be fully justified. All right? That's when the ego is the maker of the world. And in paragraph 4, he says, there is another maker of the world. And you see with a capital M, that's your hint that it's the Holy Spirit. There is another maker of the world. The simultaneous correction of the mad belief that anything could be established and maintained without some link that kept it still within the laws of God. Right? That mad belief in separation. Right? Not as the law itself upholds the universe as God created it, right, but in some form adapted to the need the Son of God believes he has. Corrected error is the error's end, and thus has God protected still his Son, even in error. All right, so there's another maker of the world. All right, and notice this. The simultaneous corrector of the mad belief that anything could be established and maintained without some link that kept it still within the laws of God. The moment the idea of separation appeared, the correction appeared. All right? I can be separate. No, you're not. And thus, all right, it corrected the mad belief that anything could be established and maintained without some link that kept it still within the laws of God. So we may believe we're here, we may believe you're all alone, you're on your own. All right, but there is a link. There is a link that keeps your mind within the laws of God, which is the oneness, the abundant love. All right. And he says, not as the law itself upholds the universe as God created it, all right, but in some form adapted to the need. All right. So this connection, this link to God, to heaven, it will come in some form, adapted to the need you think you have. Adapted to the need the Son believes he has. All right. In another point in the text, he says, your answer comes in a language that you can understand. There's some great need you believe you have. All right. If you ask for help with that belief, you'll be answered in a way that you understand. And that answer is coming from, it's a reflection of the love of heaven, the love of God, the oneness. It's a reflection of that. And you get as much as you can handle at the time. All right. That's why he says, don't worry how it happens. All right. And don't have a picture of the way it must be. Just allow it to arise in your awareness. Allow the memory of who you are to take care of it. And you'll be answered in the way that you understand. And you'll feel the peace. You'll feel peaceful. Because corrected error is the error's end. And thus has God protected still his Son, even in error, even in this error that we live in, this mistake that we live in, we are protected. All we need to do is reach out and be willing to be corrected. All right? So that the Holy Spirit becomes the other maker of the world, the maker of what we refer to in the Course as the real world. The world where things are perceived through the eyes of forgiveness and not through the eyes of guilt. Okay, paragraph 5. He says, there is another purpose in the world that error made, because it has another maker who can reconcile its goal with his creator's purpose. In his perception of the world, nothing is seen but justifies forgiveness and the sight of perfect sinlessness. Nothing arises but is met with instant and complete forgiveness. Nothing remains an instant to obscure the sinlessness that shines unchanged beyond the pitiful attempts of specialness to put it out of mind, where it must be, and light the body up instead of it. The lamps of heaven are not for mind to choose to see them where it will. If it elects to see them elsewhere from their home, as if they lit a place where they could never be, then must the maker of the world correct your error, lest you remain in darkness where the lamps are not. So he says, the lamps of heaven are not for the mind to choose to see them where it will. All right? We don't pick and choose who's forgiven, who's not. All right? So we just have to be willing to see the world, the people, the individual, just be willing to see them as forgiven. All right? We don't shine the lamp of forgiveness. We allow that light to shine on them and to enlighten us. All right? The lamps of heaven are not for the mind, are not for mind to choose to see them where it will. And he says, because if you do that, then the maker of this real world will have to correct your error. And he says there's always the pitiful attempt of specialness, right, to put forgiveness and sinlessness out of the mind, right, and to light up the body instead of it. Right? That specialness, that ego thought system wants to concentrate on the body, not on the true sinless nature of the Spirit. Right? So if I think I left heaven, I must be corrected. Right? And then he says in paragraph 6, everyone has entered darkness. Right? Everyone here has entered darkness. Yet no one has entered it alone. nor need he stay more than an instant. For he has come with heaven's help within him, ready to lead him out of darkness into light at any time. The time he chooses can be any time, for help is there, awaiting but his choice. And when he chooses to avail himself of what is given him, then will he see each situation that he thought before was means to justify his anger turn to an event which justifies his love. He will hear plainly that the calls to war he heard before are really calls to peace. He will perceive that where he gave attack is but another altar where he can, with equal ease and far more happiness, bestow forgiveness. And he will reinterpret all temptation as just another chance to bring him joy. Just as he said in the preceding paragraph, he's telling us there's another purpose in the preceding paragraph. There's another purpose to our existence here. All right? It can become a classroom to learn about forgiveness. All right? And then he says, you've all come here with that ability. All right? Everyone here has entered darkness. Yet no one has entered it alone. We have the ability to choose. Do I want this to be a classroom or a prison? Okay. He says no one has entered it alone, and no one need to stay here but for an instant. All right? There's no need to stay any longer. No need to stay in that world of illusion, that world of hatred and anger and chaos and sinfulness. All right? For he has come with heaven's help within him. You are here in the darkness with heaven's help within you. All right? The Holy Spirit, Jesus, all right, our guides through this darkness. All right? And they're ready to lead him out of the darkness into light at any time. Anytime you want. All right? The time he chooses can be any time. For help is there, awaiting but his choice. Help is there, just waiting for me and you to choose it. And when he chooses to avail himself of what is given him, all right, so when I choose the help me to see this correctly, I will see each situation that I thought was a mean to justify my anger. All right, these situations will return to an event which justifies his love. All right. And there are many things in this world. For me personally, I mean, I can turn on a dime sometimes. I'm learning to catch the triggers, but I'm learning not to stay there too long, but the triggers still remain. All right, and I can be angry at something and attack it until I choose. Until I say I don't want to be this way. I don't want to stay here in the anger. Right? I don't want to be in the anger. All right? So the help is awaiting my choice. Please help me to see this correctly. All right? To see this situation, which I thought was a mean to justify my anger, help me to see it as an event that justifies love. I don't know how to do that. Help me. All right. just thinking of recent events in the world, but hopefully, as time passes, these events won't be au courant, as we say. But nonetheless, other things will pop up and look different, but they'll be the same. There'll be an occasion where I can make a choice. Do I want to see this as an occasion to justify anger, projected guilt, or do I want to ask for help so I can see the same situation as a way to justify love? Right? He will hear plainly that the calls to war he heard before are really calls to peace. He will perceive that where he gave attack is but another altar, where he can, with equal ease and far more happiness, bestow forgiveness. And he will reinterpret all temptation as just another chance to bring him joy. Right? This is the help that we bring with us into this experience in the world. Right? We will be able to reinterpret all temptation as just another chance to be joyful, to bring us joy. Right. Paragraph 7. How can misperception be a sin? Let all your brother's errors be to you nothing except a chance for you to see the workings of the helper, given you to see the world he made instead of yours. What then is justified? What do you want? For these two questions are the same. And when you see them as the same, your choice is made. For it is seeing them as one that brings release from the belief that there are two ways to see. This world has much to offer to your peace, and many chances to extend to you your own forgiveness. Such its purpose is to those who want to see peace and forgiveness descended on them and offer them the light. So how can misperception be your sin, right? So how can the other guy be sinful? Because he's just guilty of a misperception. He's guilty of a mistake. How can they be sinful? Right? They're not worthy of love. Cast them out of the kingdom. He says, so let all these things that we thought were so sinful, let all your brother's errors be to you nothing except a chance to see the workings of the helper given you to see the world he made instead of yours. He says, let it be a chance to let Jesus and the Holy Spirit show you how they can change your perception. You could see the workings of the helper given you to see the world he made instead of yours. Right? So then he says, and after that happens, what's justified? Right? He says, what do you want? All right? He says, these questions are the same. All right? So when we see the workings of the helper, Holy Spirit, the memory of who you are, and Jesus is the embodiment of that. All right. This is what after we know that they help us to see differently. This is what's justified. Peace of mind is justified. Oneness is justified. Forgiveness is justified. He says, so what is it that you want? He goes, these questions are the same. You want that forgiveness. You want that forgiveness to descend upon you. You want that peace to descend upon you. All right? For it is, paragraph 7, sentence 7, for it is seeing them as one that brings the release from the belief that there are two ways to see. He says, look, this world has much to offer to your peace and many chances to extend your own forgiveness. All right? The world is our classroom. All right? He says, this is its purpose when you make that choice. I want to see correctly. I want to experience peace, not the chaos of war and conflict. All right. And he says, so this world has much to offer to your peace and many chances to extend your own forgiveness. All right. You can extend your own innocence. And then he says, such its purpose is. All right. Such is the world's purpose. To those who want to see peace and forgiveness, descend on them and offer them light. Right? So we make the choice. I want to see the world through corrected perception. All right? I want to see the truth. All right? Paragraph 9. The maker of the world of gentleness has perfect power to offset the world of violence and hate that seems to stand between you and his gentleness. It is not there in his forgiving eyes, and therefore it need not be there in yours. Sin is the fixed belief perception cannot change. What has been damned is damned, and damned forever, being forever unforgivable. If then it is forgiven, sin's perception must have been wrong, and thus is change made possible. The Holy Spirit, too, sees what he sees as far beyond the chance of change. But on his vision, sin cannot encroach, for sin has been corrected by his sight, and thus it must have been an error, not a sin. For what it claimed could never be. For what it claimed could never be has been. Sin is attacked by punishment, and so preserved. But to forgive is to change its state from error into truth. Right? Forgiveness, I want to see correctly, right? It can change things from error into truth. Right? And he says the maker of the world of gentleness, the Holy Spirit, right, that memory of who we are in our mind, has perfect power to offset the world of violence and hate that seems to stand between you and his gentleness. Right? And this world that we perceive can be extremely vivid in its proof. Right? It can be, the hatred can be just vivid, as they say. Right? Trying to prove to us that we're separated. But the Holy Spirit has the perfect power to offset that violence. Right? This is because that world of chaos and violence, he says, it's not there in his forgiving eyes. Right? And he says, and so it doesn't have to be there in yours. Right? We don't have to look out and become afraid or react angrily to the violence and the chaos and the hatred. Right? Because in his forgiving eyes, that doesn't have to be there. And it doesn't have to be there in your perception either. Right? Because that belief in sin is that perception can't be changed. Right? Guilt is guilt. You're guilty because you You separated from God. You're damned. Right? And what is damned and damned forever. Being forever unforgivable. Right? What you did to God was unforgivable, even though you're not even aware of it. But you do believe you're separate, and you did something wrong. Right? And the mistaken religions will reinforce the idea that you did something wrong. And you have to make sacrifices and atonement to some God that needs to be appeased. Right? Try to ask Holy Spirit how to perceive that correctly. Okay? So we look out on this world with the ego's perception, and what's damned is damned. It's done. It's unforgivable, whatever sin, that original sin was. He says, but if that original sin is forgiven through the eyes of the Holy Spirit, then sin's perception must have been wrong. And this perception of what's damned is damned and damned forever must be wrong. All right? Okay. And thus is change made possible. The change in perception is made possible. The way we see this world can be changed. Okay? Because the Holy Spirit too sees what he sees as far beyond the chance of change. So the ego sees sin as unchangeable. Can't change it. He says, but the Holy Spirit sees what he sees as unchangeable also, which is your innocence. Constantly. Holy Spirit sees your innocence as immutable. It can't be changed. Right? It just is. That's who you are. You are innocence. Right? So the Holy Spirit too sees what he sees as far beyond the chance of change. But on his vision, sin cannot encroach. So sin can't even touch it. All right? It can't move in. It's unacceptable. For sin has been corrected by his sight. All right? The error, the enormous sin has been corrected in the sight of the Holy Spirit. It's been corrected. It was an error. Right? For thus it must have been an error, not a sin. For what it claimed could never be. For what it claimed could never be has been. So what it claimed could never be is your innocence. No, you can't be innocent. You're damned. But he says, no. He says, you are innocent. What it claimed could never be has been. Sin is attacked by punishment and so preserved. So we always punish the guilty people. And therefore we preserve the idea that there are things and people and things, all kinds of things that need punishment. They're guilty. So we preserve that idea. Right? But to forgive is to change its state from error into truth. Right? All we need to do is to be willing to see the truth about whatever it is. If I'm willing to see the truth, then that enormous error, all right, can be changed. It can be corrected. Errors can be corrected, and when they're corrected, they're over. All right? Paragraph 9. The Son of God could never sin, but he can wish for what would hurt him. He has the power to think he can be hurt, what could this be except a misperception of himself? Is this a sin or a mistake? Forgivable or not? Does he need help or condemnation? Is it your purpose that he be saved or damned? Forgetting not that what he is to you will make this choice your future. For you make it now, the instant when all time becomes a means to reach a goal. Make then your choice, but recognize that in this choice, the purpose of the world you see is chosen and will be justified. So, he says, look, first of all, you can't sin, all right? You could never sin. You could never separate from God, right? But you could make this wish for what could hurt you, which is the separation. I could wish, I wish I was an individual. I wish I was separated from that oneness, that annoying oneness. All right? He says, you can wish for what would hurt you. And you have the power to think that you can be hurt. He says, your mind is so powerful that you can believe that you did it, that you're separated from God, that you can hurt yourself. And he says, but what could all these things be? All these thoughts of, I could be hurt, I could be separate, He says, well, what could this be except a misperception of yourself? They're just misperceptions of yourself. I'm separate. That's a misperception. All right. So he says, so is this a sin that can never be forgiven? Or is it a mistake? All right. Is it forgivable or not? This idea that I want to be separate, I think I want to be separate. He says, is that forgivable or not? Is it just a mistake? Or is it an egregious sin? All right. He says, do you need help or condemnation? Think about that. All right. In the situations you get yourself into in your life, did I need condemnation or did I need help? All right. Do I need help now or do I need condemnation? All right. Is it your purpose that he be saved or damned? So as we look out on others, all right, do they need help or condemnation? And by help, I mean to see them correctly. All right. And then once I want to see them correctly, perhaps the help comes in form, right? Maybe, right? But what will change is my perception of them. They don't need to be condemned, they need help. And the basic help is that they need the love they think is missing. That's the help we all need within this darkness, right? Does he need help or condemnation? And you make a choice. What's your purpose? Right? Is it your purpose that he be saved or damned? Right? Forgetting not that what he is to you will make this choice your future. So if he deserves condemnation, your future is that of condemnation. You will be condemned. All right? This is because you make that choice right now. Right now, in this instant. Every instant that goes by, he says in one point in the book, you are but reliving the time when terror took the place of love. Right? Because time is part of the illusion. There's only now. So, and right now, you're making that decision. Does the other deserve condemnation or help? Do you deserve condemnation or help? All right? For you make that decision now, the instant when all time becomes a means to reach a goal. Right? Now is the instant. Right? When all of time becomes a means to reach a goal. He goes, make then your choice. But recognize that in this choice, the purpose of the world you see is chosen. Right? And will be justified. If I choose to condemn the other, that's the purpose of the world I've chosen. All right? And my ego mind will justify it to me. All right? Well, he deserves it. You know, look what he's done. All right? The world or the ego thought system will just try to prove it to me. Try to justify my anger, my condemnation of the other. So it's always the result of the choice. Do I want to be condemned or do I want to be corrected? Do I want the other to be condemned or corrected? Does the other deserve help or condemnation? Right? This is because that choice is going to usher in your perception. All right? Your perception is going to be the result of that choice. If I want to help myself and the figures and forms that I see in my dream, all right, I ask, help me to see them correctly. All right? And that's the world I've chosen to see. And it will justify itself to me. I will see the workings of the helpers in my mind. All right. And in my experience, you know, I experience it as, you know, as they say, one step forward, one step back, 2 steps forward, 1 step back, things like that. That's the way I experience it. It's only my fear of becoming the love that makes me see the temptation to be outraged, the temptation to be angry. Right? But it's also, I'm grateful for the fact that I can realize, oh wait, I do not want to exist in that state of mind. All right? I must be wrong. I must have chosen the wrong teacher. I must have made that mistake. All right? And I ask the helpers in my mind, help me to correct that mistake. Help me to see it correctly. Help me to perceive the world through the corrected vision. And those helpers are always with us. They come with us into the insanity, into the darkness. All right? And little by little, we wake up. All right? And it just depends on when do I want to wake up. All right? How much truth can I handle? Okay. Well, thank you for the opportunity. I'm very grateful to these words. They help me to revisit that place in my mind, right, where the possibility of peace exists. I put it that way. All right then. And I will see you in the next session. All righty. Bye-bye.